My concern here is you have a field where I think the average experience level of a BCBA is about 3 years. And so you give them the most powerful tool known to man, right? And they can't make that discernment. And you have the algorithms and you have all of these incentive structures behind this chatbot, right? And so let's say you have practice management software, evil ABA, right? And they say, hey, you know what? We could increase our revenue just by telling our chatbot to give 10% more recommendation on 10% more billable hours for each ABA client. And because there isn't that level of discernment, and because, as I'm sure you're aware, like BCBAs in doing the work, like in the field, they're busy, right? I have 5 reports I need to get done this week. I've got to go out and see a bunch of clients. I have parent training that I have to do. And so if we give them this tool that is pretty reliable, what happens? Do they just accept it and say, oh yeah, I guess that's right? Do you know what I mean? That's where my concern is. And how do we use this to allow our teams to do that more personal stuff and get rid of the admin burden, but not rely so much that we lose the skill that makes us a great clinician?
Great questions. I think we have people that are going to have to put out research on this stuff to show us. And that's another really fun aspect of where we're at right now is I think there's a lot of people also offering ways to think about some of this stuff, but it's still so new. We have so little data. It's hard to know what actually works. When I think about some of this, I guess kind of also further supporting your point, we also know from like the behavioral economics, from more like the economist side, like nudge and things like that, that what I do use as the default, right? Opt in, opt out. Do you force them to edit and make changes before they can click accept, or can they just click accept and roll through?
Right.
So we know stuff about that. Choice architecture is another fun phrase. If people want to Google it, we know that's going to influence behavior, increase the likelihood that people go with whatever that default is. So there's some things, perhaps if I'm an ABA company owner and I'm chatting with vendors that are selling these products, that's one line of defense, right? Before it even gets in the hands of the BCBAs, hopefully I can help. I'm just not going to buy something for my company that might do that. It's very, we're assuming altruistic nature. There are some contingencies operating on the ABA business owner, which may or may not be lazy. But that's kind of like a first line defense. The other thing that I often think of is I've spent the last, 12, 13 years, once I kind of got into academia and on that kind of side of the world, trying to get really good at writing. And if anybody has ever written or likes to write, they're probably familiar with writing being a seemingly pretty distinct skill set from editing. And I think historically, we focused, how do you write a treatment plan? How do you write a goal that comes up? Whereas if we know this stuff is coming, and we have to get people better at critically thinking and evaluating those outputs, that's more of like an editor hat. And, hopefully the tech products can get stuff in place where they're going to force me to actually, you can't move on from this goal until 5 minutes on the page, right? And you have to make changes before you can make whatever. But we also have to give, I think, BCBAs that editing skill, which doesn't always exist. And, some of those people that are good at that, they tend to gravitate clinical directors. Sure. They move up because they learn how to evaluate others' work a bit more thoroughly. But
I never even thought about those like as specifically as different skills.
And just going back like to that, my concern, I think are those tools being generated to create a pause? Because where I see this is it's just like how much productivity can I generate from one human, right? And oh, look, we provide this AI tool and now we can get 20 reports out where we used to only get 7. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And so that is like the concern for me.
Well, even we were in a cohort with some other business owners, right? Outside of the ABA field. And they were talking about, it was an AI presentation, right? And it was still like, it's a few months ago, so it feels like it's already ancient. But the idea there is she was talking about like how to be able to like get out more emails, get out more like contacts. And it really like what came of it was like, okay, so I'm going to send out more emails, but they're going to have like, they're going to noticeably be AI emails, right? And so like if I use AI to help create emails, then I want to be able to go back in and like make my voice and make sure it matches. And there's like a lot of training and a lot of time that goes into it. And I'm like, I'm pretty good at writing emails. I could just write my own email, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like that I'm like, okay, so what's the point of this? Like I have to sit and like pause and like think about my own intention of like, what's important to me, getting out more emails or like being myself and genuine in a couple of emails. And and not that there's a right answer there. It really is probably going to depend on many variables about like the outcome that you're wanting to get. But yeah.
But I think you highlight, I think, a really interesting point that a few people have been trying to say for a few years. I mean, again, tech companies are incentivized to sell products. And often if I'm selling into a chief financial officer, CFO, it's going to come down to cost. So the pitch becomes, you can reduce cost, improve volume. So whatever. But we know contingencies, right? If I shape for volume, I get volume.
Yeah.
If I shape for quality, I get quality. There's probably a happy medium in there. As a business leader, I'm going to have to set those contingencies organizationally, right? By bringing a tool, I'm going to have to say, I'm not asking you to do 10 times more reports. I'm asking you to spend the same amount of time with each, get that first draft done first, and then spend, you used to spend 8 hours drafting, 2 editing. Now spend 2 drafting, 8 editing.
Yeah. I hope that's where this goes, right? But I am quite concerned that, especially there's just so many companies out there already kind of doing the wrong thing. And if we add this layer of, it knows better anyway. Like a great example of this, we had a call, this was probably a couple of years ago now, but it was a like brand new BCBA had just been hired as a clinical director, right? And
just had passed their exam. And I'm like, I was like, I can't really help you, right? Like I can provide you a mentor, right? I can certainly do some outreach, but like this, I wouldn't suggest taking this job. And she's like, well, I'm already in this job. And so like my concern is, does ChatGPT become, that person that helps her do this job when clearly they shouldn't be in this position, right? And so that's a really big concern for me is, what are we doing here? And then, I was talking to someone else in AI and it's like, that talking about AI and they were like, well, if this AI system can do better work and provide better outcomes, what are we doing here? And at the same time, it's like, but isn't this a human, like if anything else, right? Like ABA is like, it's supposed to be about human interaction. So are we losing something here? And maybe I'm just like, maybe I'm the guy that was like, hey, Google's really bad. I don't know if we should do Google, right? Like the old guy
25 years ago, right? Maybe that's just me now, right? And I'm just crying out here, and it's like, dude, move on, right? Like it's coming.
But I guess it is important too to look at the outcome. And you mentioned that at the beginning of the conversation, David, about the having the same outcome. And we've had a couple other conversations with others in the field, and that's what we've also looked at, right? Like the outcome, like what is really important here.
I mean, I think there's a couple of things in what y'all said that I thought of being fun to respond to. Related to this piece, I think there's two important points. One is, I agree, and from early days AI, and to be clear, like I started playing around with machine learning, a type of AI, in like 2015, 2016. For a long time, I was trying to convince people to even care about this. I'm like, no, this is really cool stuff. And then ChatGPT came out, and I'm trying to pull it back, like, no, be concerned. But I think I do agree. Like at the end of the day, you're going to a surgeon. I want the highest probability of the best outcomes for me, right. Robot or human. I want the best. And so I appreciate that argument. One challenge, though, is that many of these systems haven't demonstrated that that's true with theirs. Right? They'll make the claim, right, you can do this faster, it'll be better. Where's your data, right? At the end of the day, behavior analysts, you should be scientists. Yeah. Prove to me that that's true. Secondly, all these systems are primarily using large language models, which is a bunch of models on words and language gathered from the internet, which means they're really good at playing with textual behavior. But going back to like what's lost here, I would argue that 99% of being a behavior analyst is not playing with text. It's observing a human in a physical environment. Yeah. And it's all the nuance of the behavior, the environment, how people are responding. That's what I'm analyzing. I may figure out how to transcribe that into data. I may write about what I'm observing, but they're not the same thing. And I think people sometimes get lost in like, yeah, it can play with words incredibly well. And based on the average of similar things it's seen, generate a treatment report. But unless there's a human to ground that back to reality, there's no guarantee that even if it's perfectly accurate and all sorts of, however we want to define that, it may or may not still apply to my client and like what I physically see. Yeah. And that's where, again, I get concerned because I do think we're losing that connection, or people may not recognize that. But then also RBTs, new BCBAs, if I'm not practicing that skill 5 years, 6 years down the road, the Stanford AI report shows us we're going to be shaped to the average of textual outputs on the internet.